Hello, healthcare aid students. My name is Anthony, and this will be our first video trying to help with 1402. I've noticed that a couple of students have been struggling lately understanding the body systems. So this video will try to clarify concepts regarding the endocrine system. And essentially, the endocrine system is a series of glands which produce hormones. And these hormones are chemical messengers which flow through the bloodstream and reach a target organ to control the body's processes. So if you look at the animation, we start with the gland. Pretend that that green hexagon is a hormone, travels through the blood, reaches the effector, and it will trigger a effect. The best way to understand the endocrine system is to understand the major glands. Our first one is the most important, and it's called the pituitary gland. This is important because it releases hormones which control other endocrine glands, and it also secretes quite a few of them as well. So let's walk down the list of organs affected by the endocrine system and are also a part of it. The first one is not a gland itself, but it is affected by the pituitary gland, called the musculoskeletal system. Second are the adrenal glands. Third is the thyroid and parathyroid. The fourth and fifth are the uterus and testes, as well as ovaries. And the final one is the pancreas. So let's begin with the musculoskeletal system. So the first important pituitary gland hormone is called GH, or growth hormone. And essentially what it does is what's in its name, and it grows muscles and bones. You release a lot of this when you sleep and exercise, so make sure you do this during school. All right, so next is the kidneys and adrenal glands, and the pituitary actually releases two hormones for this. So there's two important organs to note in this slide, and that's the kidney and the adrenal gland that sits on top. Let's look at the first pathway, which involves ACTH. That stands for adrenocorticotropic hormone, which means that it targets the adrenal glands to release another hormone. This is called cortisol. Cortisol is a stress hormone which mobilizes sugars, fats, and proteins and uses it for energy for your muscles to use in a flight or fight scenario. The second pathway is ADH, or antidiuretic hormone. What this does in the nephron is it keeps water in the body. So instead of it going to your urine, it goes back into your bloodstream. There's also a third hormone of note here called aldosterone. And what aldosterone does is it retains sodium into the blood. So the big difference between ADH is that it retains water, while aldosterone retains sodium. Next is the thyroid and parathyroids. This is affected by TSH. So the thyroid sits in the front of your neck, right in front of your trachea. And there are also four small glands right behind it called the parathyroid glands. So let's start with the pituitary, which releases TSH, or thyroid stimulating hormone. And what this does is it makes the thyroid release T3 and T4, which is also called thyroxine. Thyroxine is important because it controls your metabolism and your body's energy. But the thyroid also has another feature as well. So pertaining to calcium in blood, Your parathyroid releases PTH, which is called parathyroid hormone, and this increases the concentration of calcium in your blood. Now, the thyroid releases something called calcitonin, which takes calcium out of your blood. They're essentially antagonistic hormones, which means they counteract each other. Oxytocin is released by the pituitary during childbirth. And what it does is it makes the uterus contract hard enough to push out a baby. It's also released during social bonding as well. Next gland is called the pancreas, and it's actually not controlled by the pituitary at all, but it still has an important role in controlling your blood sugar. So it has two important hormones to talk about. And the first one is glucagon, which causes your cells to put their sugar back into the bloodstream. The next one is called insulin, which does the complete opposite and tells cells to take sugar and store it. These are also antagonistic hormones similar to parathyroid hormone and calcitonin. Lastly, we're going to talk about the testes and the ovaries, which will produce your sex hormones. Now, finally, we have our gonads, which produce sex hormones. Starting with the ovaries, it actually produces two hormones. The first one is called estrogen. And estrogen is important because it develops the egg follicle for menstruation. It also promotes secondary sex characteristics in females, such as softer skin, breast development, and a different fat distribution than males. For example, females tend to store their fat in their hips and thighs, while men's tend to store it in their stomach. The second one is progesterone. And this hormone is important because it affects the uterine lining. What it does is it thickens the uterine lining so that it's more ready to accept a baby. Now for the testes. The testes produce one hormone, and that's testosterone. Testosterone is basically equivalent to estrogen in males, and it promotes the development of sperm, as well as secondary sex characteristics in males, such as a different frame. For example, men tend to have broader shoulders than women, as well as an Adam's apple and facial hair. So now that we've gone through all the hormones of the endocrine system, I made a little summary table, and feel free to screenshot and use this to study. We have growth hormone, antidiuretic hormone, everything that we've just reviewed. This is one of two parts, so I've turned off my face cam to not block any of the entries. And this is the second part of the table, which wraps up all the hormones. So thank you for tuning in. I'll be sure to make more videos, hopefully in time for the finals. And have a great day. Thank you so much.